I used to tell myself that birthdays didn't matter, that they were just days on the calendar, no different than any other, just numbers sliding into the next. That's what I repeated every year as a way to comfort myself, to make the sting a little less sharp. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Birthdays mattered. They were supposed to matter. They were the one day out of the year where you felt seen, celebrated, remembered. And yet, in my family, it was the day I learned to expect nothing. Because in my family, birthdays were never about me. They were always about my brother. My brother, Daniel, was the golden child, the sun in the center of our little family universe. From the time he was born, everything revolved around him, his first steps, his first words, his every achievement. When it was his birthday, my parents pulled out all the stops. The house would transform overnight into a party zone. Balloons, covering the living room, streamers hanging from the ceiling, giant cakes decorated with superheroes when he was a kid, expensive customized cakes when he got older. My mom would spend weeks planning every detail, and my dad would swipe his credit. Card like money grew on trees, renting clowns, magicians, DJs, bounce houses, whatever Daniel wanted. The guest list always ran into the hundreds. Neighbors, classmates, even family friends from states away. The parties would be so big that kids at school would talk about them for weeks afterward. But when it came to my birthday, silence. I remember one of my earliest birthdays vividly. I was turning 8, that age where kids still believe their parents will do something magical, something to make them feel special. I came downstairs that morning, my little heart pounding, hoping maybe this time there'd be balloons or a cake. But the kitchen looked exactly the same as every other day. No decorations, no presents, no smell of cake in the oven. My mom glanced, up from her coffee, said good morning, then added absent-mindedly, "Oh, right, happy birthday." That was it. I stood there in my pajamas, waiting, thinking maybe she was pretending. Maybe it was going to be a surprise later. But nothing came. That night, while Daniel sat on the couch playing with his new video game, I went to bed early. I cried into my pillow, trying to convince myself it didn't matter, that I was fine, that maybe they just forgot this one time. But it wasn't one time. Year after year, the pattern repeated. Daniel got the balloons, the parties, the piles of gifts. I got nothing. Sometimes not even a happy birthday until I reminded them. And even then, it felt like a chore for them to acknowledge it. We've been busy. It slipped our mind. You don't need all that fuss. That's what they told me. And each time, a little piece of me shrank smaller. When I turned 12, I remember trying to bake myself a cake. It was a box mix, and I had no idea what I was doing. The cake came out lopsided, half stuck to the pan, but I lit a candle and sang happy birthday to myself in the kitchen. My mom walked in halfway through, looked at me like I was being dramatic, and said, "Why are you wasting food? We can't afford to throw ingredients around for nothing." Then she walked out. I blew out the candle, whispered a wish to be loved, and scraped the mess into the trash. By the time I hit high school, I stopped expecting anything. When friends asked if I was having a party, I'd shrug and say, "Nah, birthdays aren't my thing." I let them believe I was too cool for traditions, too independent to need balloons and cake. But inside, I felt that familiar ache, that constant question, why wasn't I worth celebrating? And the contrast never stopped hurting. One year, when Daniel turned 16, my parents rented out an entire banquet hall. They invited over 200 people. He got a brand new car, parked outside with a giant red bow. My mom cried happy tears as he cut into a custom 3-tier cake. Meanwhile, a month later, when I turned 15, all I got was silence. My parents spent the day cleaning up leftover party supplies from his event. I ate leftover pizza for dinner and went to bed. No party, no car, not even a card. That was the moment it clicked for me. It wasn't that they forgot. They never forgot. They just didn't care. And the thing about being ignored like that year after year is that it teaches you two lessons. 1. You start to believe maybe you're not worth it. Maybe they're right. Maybe you don't deserve attention, or cake, or love. But lesson 2? That's the one that sticks. Lesson 2 is that you learn to stop depending on anyone else for validation. You learn to keep score in silence. You learn patience. I carried that patience into adulthood. Even in college, they never called on my birthday. Not once, but they always called Daniel, always posted pictures of his parties online, always bragged about what they bought him. When I graduated, they skipped the ceremony because it wasn't convenient. When Daniel graduated, they threw him a party bigger than his 16th birthday. I showed up to that party, clapping for him with a polite smile, feeling invisible the whole time. I swallowed it, all of it. Every slight, every dismissal, every forgotten birthday. But I never forgot. Because here's the thing about being invisible. One day, you get tired of it. One day you decide you're not going to let it slide, and for me, that day came this year. I turned 27 this year, old enough to not expect balloons or cake, but young enough to still feel the sting when you're erased. And for the, first time, my birthday fell on a Saturday, a day perfect for a celebration. Somewhere deep down, a part of me still hoped maybe they'd do something. Maybe they'd surprise me. Maybe they'd finally see me. I woke up that morning, heart racing like a little kid's, phone in hand, waiting for texts. But nothing came. Not a single happy birthday. The house was quiet. My parents didn't call. Daniel didn't call. I told myself not to cry. I told myself I was too old for this. But the ache was still there, gnawing. By afternoon, I tried to distract myself, scrolling through social media. That's when I saw it. Daniel's Instagram story. There he was, standing in a banquet hall. Balloons everywhere, champagne flowing, music blasting. He was cutting into a giant cake shaped like a luxury car. And the caption, "Surprise party! Thanks Mom and Dad for the best day ever." My heart stopped, my vision blurred, because the date on the story was my birthday, my day. And they hadn't forgotten. They had replaced me. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. They had deliberately thrown a party on my birthday, but not for me, for him. Something inside me cracked wide open. Years of silence, of swallowing pain, of convincing myself it didn't matter. They all came flooding out in a surge of rage and clarity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to accept being invisible. I grabbed my keys. I didn't know what I was going to do exactly, but I knew one thing for sure. This year, I wasn't going to sit quietly while they erased me again. This year, I was going to show up. And this time, they weren't going to forget me. When I pulled up outside the banquet hall, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely turn off the ignition. The music was thundering from inside, heavy bass lines vibrating the glass windows, and I could already see clusters of people spilling out onto the sidewalk with drinks in their hands. Laughter, shouting, clinking glasses. It was chaos, the kind of celebration my brother had always been given. And it was happening on my birthday. I sat there in my car for a minute, staring at the neon lights flashing across the venue's entrance, trying to decide if I had the courage to walk in. A part of me whispered that I should just leave, drive away, cry it out at home, and move on like I always had, that it wasn't worth it, that I'd just embarrass myself. But another part of me, the part that had been ignored and silenced and shoved into the background for 27 years, rose up like a scream in my chest. No, not this time. I got out of the car. The cold night air hit me, but the adrenaline burning inside kept me warm. As I walked toward the door, I saw the banner stretched across the entrance. "Happy birthday, Daniel." My brother's smiling face was printed on the banner in giant letters. It felt like a slap in the face, but instead of backing down, it fueled me. Inside, the place looked like something out of a movie. Glittering chandeliers hung from the ceiling. A DJ blasted music from a raised booth. Tables were stacked with trays of food and alcohol, and everywhere I looked, people were laughing and celebrating. Daniel was in the center of it all, dressed in designer clothes, surrounded by friends, with my parents beaming proudly at his side. My mother was wearing the expensive pearl necklace she only pulled out for special occasions. My father had a drink in hand, bragging loudly about how successful and generous his son was. They looked radiant, like this was the proudest moment of their lives, and none of them had even thought to call me. I felt my chest tighten as I stood, there unnoticed in the doorway, watching them celebrate my brother on the very day I was born. For a moment, I thought I might break down then and there, but instead, I straightened my back and forced myself forward. No one stopped me. No one asked why I was there. I might as well have been invisible, even in that crowd of hundreds. I wove through the guests until I reached the stage, where Daniel was grinning ear to ear as someone handed him a microphone. "Thanks for coming, everyone," he shouted over the music, his voice booming through the speakers. "This means the world to me. Best parents in the world right here, thank you for everything." The crowd erupted in cheers. My parents clapped the loudest of all. That was when something inside me snapped. Before I even realized what I was doing, I climbed up onto the stage and took the microphone right out of his hand. The music was still pounding, the lights still flashing, but as I raised the mic to my mouth, the crowd slowly fell into silence, confused and curious. My brother stared at me, stunned. My parents looked like they'd just seen a ghost. I swallowed hard, my palms slick with sweat, but I forced the words out. "Funny thing," I began, my voice shaking at first but growing stronger with each word. "Today isn't Daniel's birthday. Today is mine." A ripple went through the crowd. People looked at each other, murmuring. I saw eyebrows raise, heard whispers. My brother tried to grab the mic back, but I stepped away from him, holding it tight. "For 27 years, I continued, "this family has celebrated him. Lavish parties, expensive gifts, public praise. And for 27 years, they've erased me. Not once." My voice cracked, but I steadied it. "Not once have they thrown me a party, baked me a cake, or even bothered to remember. Every, single year, I've been invisible." The room was dead quiet now. Even the DJ had cut the music. My mother's face had gone pale. My father's mouth hung open, but no words came out. My brother was frozen, still clutching the mic stand. I looked out at the sea of faces, neighbors, family friends, people who had known us since childhood, and I kept going. They didn't forget me this year. They didn't make a mistake. They deliberately chose today, my birthday, to throw him this party. They replaced me, like I don't exist. Gasps rose from the crowd. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone near the back muttered, "Wait, is that true?" I turned back toward my parents, my voice shaking now, not from fear but from fury. For years I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself birthdays weren't important. But the truth? They are important. They're about love, about being seen, about being valued, and you've made it clear year after year that I don't matter to you. My father finally found his voice. "That's enough," he snapped, trying to sound authoritative. But his voice wavered, betraying him. "No," I said firmly, gripping the microphone tighter. "It's not enough. Not until the truth is out." I could see the guests shifting, glancing between me and my parents. Some looked horrified. Others looked sympathetic. A few had their phones out, recording. "Do you know what it feels like?" I asked the crowd, my voice breaking now. "To bake your own birthday cake at 12 years old because no one else cared? To sing happy birthday to yourself while your family acts like you don't exist? To watch your brother get showered with gifts while you can't even get a phone call? A hush fell over the room. People stared at me with wide eyes, some with pity, some with shame on my parents' behalf. For 27 years, I said softly, I've been erased. But not anymore. Tonight, you don't get to ignore me. Tonight, you get to hear me. I dropped the microphone onto the stage floor with a thud that echoed through the hall. For a long, frozen moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the whispers began. I saw some guests shaking their heads, picking up their coats. A group of family friends walked out, disgust written across their faces. Others stayed, whispering fiercely among themselves, shooting my parents cold looks. My mother's face was white as chalk. My father looked like someone had punched him. Daniel stood there, red-faced and humiliated, clutching his drink. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I walked off that stage with my head high. People parted to let me through, some patting me on the shoulder as I passed, others giving me nods of quiet support. The tension in the room was so thick it was suffocating, but I didn't care. I had finally spoken. When I stepped back out into the cold night air, I felt something strange. Not relief exactly, not joy, but power. For once, they couldn't erase me. For once, I had forced them to see me. I got into my car, my hands still shaking, my heart still racing, and I sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. I knew things would never be the same after this. I knew my parents would be furious, that Daniel would hate me even more than he already did. I knew I'd probably get a phone call later filled with shouting and accusations. But I also knew one thing. I had taken back my voice. And once you find your voice, you can never go back to silence. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because the party might have ended, but the fallout had only just begun. The phone call came the very next morning. I wasn't even surprised. I had been expecting it. I'd barely gotten 2 hours of sleep, tossing and turning, replaying every second of what I'd done on that stage. My heart still raced whenever I remembered the way the crowd went silent, the way people's eyes locked onto me, the way my parents' faces twisted with shock. So when my phone lit up with my mom's name at 7:00 a.m., I just stared at it for a moment, letting it buzz on the nightstand. My stomach clenched, but I refused to rush to answer. I wasn't that little girl anymore, desperate for their attention. Finally, I picked it up and swiped to answer. What the hell was that? My mom's voice snapped through the line before I could even say hello. Good morning to you too, I said flatly, though my heart was pounding. Don't you dare. Get smart with me, she hissed. You humiliated this family last night. Do you have any idea what you've done? People are talking. Your uncle called this morning. Your aunt is furious. I cut her off before she could spiral into her usual tirade. You mean they're finally talking about me, after 27 years of pretending I don't exist? There was a long pause. Then, in that cold, sharp tone she'd always reserved for me, she said, You're jealous. That's what this is about. Jealous of your brother, jealous of the attention he gets. You've always been selfish. Something in me snapped at that. I sat up in bed, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Selfish? I spat. I paid your hospital bills when you were sick, remember? I covered your car. Payment when Dad couldn't. Daniel was blowing your money on parties, and I was the one keeping things afloat. And you call me selfish? Silence. For once, she didn't have a quick comeback. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, but laced with venom. You'll regret this. You've turned the whole family against you. Don't bother coming around here anymore. And just like that, she hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time, numb. A part of me hurt, because no matter how tough I wanted to sound, hearing your own mother disown you cuts deep. But another part of me felt strangely free. She had been pushing me out of the family circle for years, and now she'd just made it official. Later that afternoon, my brother texted me. His message was short, full of the arrogance I'd come to expect. "Daniel, you're dead to me. Don't ever show your face around us again." I laughed bitterly when I read it. Dead to him? I had been dead to them for years. At least now they were finally saying it out loud. But what I didn't expect was what came next. Because while my parents and brother tried to cut me off completely, the fallout from that party didn't go the way they planned. Over the next week, I started getting calls and texts from people who had been there. Family friends, neighbors, even distant relatives who had seen the videos floating around social media. Apparently, a few guests had recorded my speech and uploaded it online. One video in particular had gone viral, hundreds of thousands of views. The caption read, "Woman crashes brother's birthday party, reveals it's actually her birthday." The comments were brutal. "Imagine treating your kid like that. Poor girl. I feel for her. Parents like these don't deserve children. She deserves so much better. I hope she cuts them off." I couldn't stop scrolling through the comments, tears streaming down my face. For the first time in my life, strangers, complete strangers, were validating my pain. They were saying out loud the things I had always been too afraid to admit. It was surreal. But it also made me realize something. For years, I had let my family's treatment define me. I had let their neglect convince me I wasn't worth celebrating, that I wasn't important. And yet here were thousands of people proving that wasn't true. I wasn't invisible. Not anymore. A few days later, I was walking home from work when a woman stopped me on the street. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly. "Are you the girl from the birthday video?" I froze, embarrassed, but nodded. Her eyes softened. "I just wanted to say, you're brave. What you did? That was powerful. I wish I'd had the courage to stand up to my family like that." I thanked her, my voice catching in my throat, and walked away with my heart pounding. It was strange, being recognized, but it also felt good. Still, not everyone was supportive. My parents went into damage control mode, calling relatives, insisting I was lying, saying I had overreacted. My brother posted long rants on Instagram about how I was jealous and crazy. He painted himself as the victim, the poor son whose big night had been ruined by his bitter sister. But the thing about the truth? It has a way of sticking. And no matter how hard they tried to spin the story, the cracks in their perfect image were showing. One night, about a week later, I got a call from my cousin Sarah. She was one of the few relatives I'd always liked. Kind, gentle, never mean. To me, even when everyone else was. "I just wanted to tell you," she said softly. "I'm proud of you. I know it couldn't have been easy. And honestly, you were right. We all saw how they treated you. None of us ever said anything, and I regret that, but you were right to finally speak up." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I realized then that even the relatives who had stayed silent all those years, they knew. They had seen it. They just hadn't had the courage to step in. And now, my parents were being forced to face something they had spent years avoiding: accountability. Of course, they didn't take it well. 2 weeks after the party, my dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. When I opened the door, he looked furious, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. "Do you have any idea how badly you've damaged this family?" he demanded. "Your mother hasn't stopped crying. Your brother's humiliated. People won't. Stop talking! You've disgraced us!" I stood in the doorway, blocking him from coming in. "Disgraced you?" I shot back. "No, Dad. You disgraced yourselves. You forgot your own daughter's birthday for 27 years. You threw a party for Daniel on my day. I didn't disgrace you. I exposed you." His face went red with anger, but for once he had no comeback. He just stood there sputtering before finally muttering, "You'll regret this," and storming off. As I watched him leave, I felt something shift inside me. For years I had been terrified of my father's disapproval. His sharp words, his cold glares, his dismissive attitude. It had always crushed me. But now? Now I saw him for what he was. A man more concerned with appearances than with his own daughter's happiness. And suddenly, he didn't seem so scary anymore. But little did I know, the real consequences of that night were still on their way. Because while my parents were busy trying to protect their reputation, life was about to teach them a lesson. Karma, as they say, has perfect timing, and it was just around the corner. Karma doesn't come quickly. It doesn't come when you're begging for it. But when it arrives, it hits harder than anything you could plan yourself. And for my family, karma showed up just a few weeks after that infamous party. It started small. At first, it was little things, like people around town treating them differently. For years, my parents had been the golden couple, always admired, always respected. They were the ones throwing the best parties, showing off their perfect son, telling anyone who would listen how well their family was doing. But after the video went viral, people weren't so quick to applaud. Some neighbors stopped waving when they passed. A few family friends began declining invites. And when my mom walked into church, she told relatives later, people whispered behind her back, "They're saying you embarrassed us," she snapped at me over the phone one night, clearly trying to shift the blame. But I knew better. They weren't whispering because of me. They were whispering because the truth had come out, and my parents couldn't hide it anymore. Then things escalated. Daniel, the golden boy himself, started facing consequences he'd never experienced before. For so long, he'd been untouchable. Spoiled. Every mistake he made was swept under the rug, every failure covered by my parents. But when the video spread, people began to see him differently. One day, I got a message from one of his old classmates. "Hey, I saw your brother on Instagram whining about you. Honestly, none of us are surprised. He was always the favorite. And everyone knew it. Karma's finally catching up." And catch up it did. Within a month, Daniel lost his job. He'd been coasting on charm and my parents' connections, but after his employer saw the viral clip and all the comments trashing his behavior, they decided he wasn't exactly the kind of family man image they wanted representing them. He called me late one night, drunk and angry, leaving me a voicemail full of slurred curses. "You ruined my life," he shouted into the phone. "You took everything from me. Everyone hates me now. It's your fault." I listened to the "I for" message twice, then deleted it. Because deep down, I knew the truth. I hadn't ruined anything. He'd done that himself. Meanwhile, my parents were drowning in the fallout. That picture-perfect reputation they'd spent decades building crumbled overnight. My mom tried to double down, posting overly cheerful photos of family dinners, without me, of course. But the comments under her post told a different story. People weren't buying it. "Where's your daughter? Don't you have 2 kids? Funny how you pretend she doesn't exist, even after she told the whole world. Stop faking. Everyone knows the truth now." She ended up deleting half her posts. But the biggest blow came when my parents' finances started unraveling. For years, they'd lived beyond their means. Lavish vacations, new cars, expensive parties for Daniel. I knew they were in debt, but I didn't realize how bad it was until creditors started calling me. Apparently, my mom had used my name as a co-signer years ago for one of their loans. I nearly screamed when I found out, but luckily, I'd built up enough of a paper trail to prove I had no knowledge of it. Still, it made me realize how desperate they were. And when Daniel lost his job, suddenly, the golden child wasn't able to keep up his lifestyle anymore. The credit cards were maxed out, the mortgage payments were piling up, and for the first time in my life, they were the ones scrambling to survive. I wish I could say I didn't feel satisfaction watching it happen, but I did. For years, I had been the invisible one. I had been the one struggling, working multiple jobs, getting no help, no support, no love. And now? The roles were reversed. One night, I was cooking dinner when my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was Daniel. I almost ignored it. But something in me wanted to hear what he had to say, so I picked up. Hello? There was silence for a moment, and then a broken voice whispered, I need your help. For a second, I thought I misheard him. Daniel? The brother who never lifted a finger for me? The brother who stole every birthday, every ounce of attention, every drop of affection from our parents. Excuse me? I said coldly. I'm serious, he said, his voice shaking. I'm drowning here. I lost my job, the bills are piling up, and Mom and Dad can't cover everything anymore. Please, I don't know what to do. I leaned against the counter, gripping the phone tightly. Part of me wanted to laugh, another part wanted to scream. But instead I said, why don't you ask Mom and Dad? They always had money for you. They don't anymore, he admitted quietly. Everything's falling apart. And I can't do this alone. There it was, the golden boy, stripped of his crown, begging for the very thing I had always begged for, support. But I wasn't about to hand it to him, not after everything. Daniel, I said firmly, do you remember all those years I asked for help? For a birthday cake? For a card? For even a phone call? Do you remember how you and Mom and Dad laughed and celebrated while I sat alone? You didn't care then. Why should I care now? His silence was deafening. I'm sorry, he whispered, finally. But the words sounded hollow, like they had been forced out of him, not genuine, not heartfelt. Keep your sorry, I told him. You're going to need it. And then I hung up. For the first time in my life, I realized I had power. Real power. They couldn't erase me anymore. They couldn't silence me. They couldn't pretend I didn't exist, because the whole world had seen the truth. But here's the thing. Power doesn't erase pain. Even as I stood taller, even as people applauded me online and in person, even as my family fell apart, there was still that little girl inside me, the one who cried on her birthdays, the one who stared at empty plates while Daniel blew out candles, the one who longed for her mom's hug and never got it. That little girl was still there, whispering, why didn't they love me? And that question hurt more than anything. Still, I wasn't about to let it break me. A few days later, I decided to throw my own party. Not a birthday party. I wasn't ready for that yet. But a celebration of freedom. I rented out a small hall with my own money, decorated it with simple balloons, and invited friends, coworkers, even some of the supportive strangers I had met online. The night of the event, as music played and people laughed and danced, I looked around and realized something. For the first time ever, I wasn't invisible. I was seen. I was loved, not by my parents, not by my brother, but by people who chose me. People who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. And that was more powerful than any party my family had ever thrown. As the night went on, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never again beg for their approval. I would never again sit in silence, waiting for someone else to celebrate me. From now on, I would celebrate myself, because sometimes the family you're born into fails you, but the family you build for yourself, that's where the real love is. And while karma continued to eat away at my parents and brother, I finally began building a life worth living. A life where I was no longer erased. A life where my story was mine to tell. And trust me, it was just getting started. I thought, karma had already done its work. I thought the whispers, the lost job, the financial unraveling, that was the end of it. But no, that was just the beginning. See, the thing about people like my parents and my brother is this: they don't learn the first time. They don't sit down and reflect. They don't look at the pain they've caused and think, wow, I need to change. No, they double down. They keep lying, keep faking, keep scrambling to keep their masks glued on. And that's exactly what they tried to do. But karma has patience. And when it circles back, it doesn't just tap you on the shoulder, it knocks the entire house down. It started with Daniel again. After losing his job, he tried hustling online, selling little things on marketplaces, pretending he was suddenly an entrepreneur. He posted motivational quotes about bouncing back and staying strong. But behind the scenes, he was collapsing. I knew because he couldn't resist ranting about me. Every other post somehow turned into a dig at his jealous sister. He painted himself as the victim, saying I had ruined the family. What he didn't realize was that the internet has a long memory. Every time he tried to spin the story, people pulled up the old video. They dragged him in the comments. Screenshots of his entitled behavior resurfaced, and slowly, the few supporters he had left drifted away. The golden boy had become a joke. Meanwhile, my parents were desperate. With the debts piling up, they started selling off their status symbols. First, the fancy car, then some jewelry, then, eventually, the vacation home they'd bragged about for years. I watched from a distance as their perfect world unraveled piece by piece. And here's the strange thing. Part of me felt sorry for them. Even after everything, there was a piece of me that still wanted them to wake up, to finally see me, to finally apologize. But every time I thought maybe that day had come, they proved me wrong. Like when my mom called out of the blue one afternoon. For a split second, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe she's calling to make things right. I picked up and said softly, "Hi, Mom." She didn't even say hello. The first words out of her mouth were, "You need to stop embarrassing us." Online, I stood there frozen, the phone pressed to my ear, my heart pounding. Not a single word of apology. Not a single acknowledgement of what they'd done to me. Just blame. Just shame. I cut her off mid-sentence. "Mom, the only reason you feel embarrassed is because people finally see the truth. And if the truth hurts you that much, maybe you should have treated me differently." There was silence. Then she snapped, "You'll regret turning on your family." And I hung up. That was the last real conversation I had with her. After that, the distance grew wider. They kept spiraling and I kept building. My own little celebration party had turned into a regular gathering with friends who truly cared. I started therapy, something I had avoided for years because I didn't think I deserved it. And slowly, painfully, I began to stitch myself back, together. But karma wasn't done with them yet. The final blow came the following year. I'll never forget the phone call I got late at night from a relative I barely spoke to. She told me my dad had been caught in a financial scheme. Something shady with his business, cutting corners, hiding losses. The details were messy, but the outcome was clear. He was under investigation. Suddenly, the same people who once admired him wanted nothing to do with him. Friends vanished, business partners ghosted. Even the neighbors who used to line up for their backyard parties stopped showing up. My parents were humiliated in the very town where they had once been royalty. And Daniel? He crumbled completely. Without my dad's financial backing and without a job of his own, he ended up moving back into my parents' house. The golden boy was now a 30-something man sitting in his childhood bedroom, scrolling online, blaming everyone but himself. And me? For the first time in my life, I was thriving. I had gotten a promotion at work. I had saved up enough to move into a bigger apartment, and every birthday, every holiday, every milestone, I celebrated on my own terms, with people who saw me, who valued me, who loved me. But here's the truth I want to share, the part that still makes my voice tremble when I say it out loud. No amount of karma erases the scars. Even as they fell apart, even as I rose higher, there was always that ache. That little voice inside, me asking, why wasn't I enough for them? And I realized something important. Closure doesn't come from your family finally apologizing. Closure doesn't come from watching karma punish them. Closure comes from choosing yourself. That was the hardest lesson of all. Because in the back of my mind, I kept waiting for the movie moment, the tearful apology, the hug, the parents who finally admitted they were wrong. But that moment never came. And I had to accept it, never would. Instead, my closure came one quiet morning when I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee. My phone buzzed with another one of Daniel's desperate rants online. And for the first time, instead of feeling angry or sad or bitter, I felt nothing. Nothing at all. I realized then that they no longer had power over me. Their voices, their favoritism, their neglect, it didn't define me anymore. I wasn't the forgotten child. I wasn't the erased daughter. I was me. Whole, worthy, strong. That was my ending, not their downfall, not their shame, my freedom. And that's why when people ask if I ever forgave them, I say this: I didn't. Forgive to heal them. I forgave to free myself, because carrying their poison in my heart was never going to fix me. Letting it go was the only way forward. So now, when I look back, I don't see the little girl crying alone in her room anymore. I see a woman who survived, a woman who found her voice, a woman who built a life without the people who tried to erase her. And honestly, that's the best karma of all.